Hello and welcome to American Government and Politics. This is Professor Jonathan Day. In this lecture, we'll be looking at public opinion. So what is public opinion? Public opinion, in the context of American government and politics, generally refers to the collective beliefs, attitudes, and the preferences of the general public regarding various political issues, policy, and elected officials. And so with public opinion, we're looking at things, for example, of what should government do, how well is government performing its functions, and also are the elected officials doing well. And so we ask the general people, the general public, in terms of whether it's telephone or internet surveys, or whether it's in small focus groups. We're trying to gauge the public's beliefs and attitudes and preferences towards particular politicians, like the president, towards particular issues, maybe like healthcare, or particular things that are going on, say, for example, the war in Ukraine and Russia. So, why does public opinion matter? It matters for several reasons. First, it matters because in our system of a democratic republic, we're looking at how does these issues affect society, and also how our politicians are doing. And so in order to for officials to figure out what the people want, they need to have a good gauge on what public opinion is. It also matters in the context of legitimacy. So the public has to have a good opinion of the government in order for the government to maintain its legitimacy, meaning that people will want to follow the rules and the laws and not revolt against it. It also is important for policy formulation. So policymakers need to know the concerns and the preferences of the public and their needs in order to develop policies that reflect the interests of the citizens. And the reason politicians want to do this particularly is for election purposes, right? So the public opinion is vital in order to understand for a political candidate, because they need to know whether or not they are doing what their constituents want. Because if they don't, they will not get reelected. And so for all of these reasons, we spend a great deal of time and money trying to understand what the public thinks about the government, about politicians, and about issues, because it affects the way our government governs. It affects the policies that happen. It affects their legitimacy. And it also affects whether or not politicians will get reelected. But where does public opinion come from? So the thing to think about with regards to this is that there are a series of things that shape people's political beliefs and attitudes. So, for example, the process of socialization occurs that when children are really young, they learn to understand the world through their families and communities, right? And so the families and communities that they grow up a part of will help to shape their understanding of the world and thus understand what they want from government. Events can also affect people's opinions, right? So an event can cause a shift in the general public's attitudes and opinions about particular things. So, for example, civil rights movement changed people's beliefs a little bit with regards to race. 9/11 changed people's perception or beliefs with regards to safety versus liberty. And then COVID changed also our beliefs with regards to what the government can mandate and so forth. So events can greatly shape the opinion of society. Groups can also change people's opinions over time. So when we live in a particular region or we are with a particular group, they will help mold and shape our beliefs about particular issues. And then finally, politicians and other political actors have been identified as a cause in the change of people's opinions, right? So if the president or major politicians come out in support or in opposition to something, that can change people's opinions. So how do we measure public opinion, right? So we need to understand what public opinion is and how to measure it so that politicians can know how to respond to the public's wishes. And we do this in a couple of different ways. First, we take opinion polls, and these involve random sampling techniques to discern what the public's attitudes and preferences are over a particular issue. With regards to opinion polls, we do things like surveys, and that can take place over the telephone, on the internet, or it can do face-to-face surveys. We also do, to understand public opinion, focus groups are used. This is where you bring in, say, 5, 6, 7, 8 different people, maybe a little bit more, and they come in and you ask them a series of questions, and then as a group, they respond individually and as a group to particular questions to help gauge their particular opinion. This also helps with campaigns. Politicians and candidates use this to figure out what ads work and what ads don't. And then election results. Voting patterns and election outcomes provide an indication of public opinion at the ballot box. When people vote, we really know who they're supporting and who they're not supporting. And then finally, social media analysis. If we analyze the trends and sentiments on social media platforms, we can get an insight to how people view certain things and certain events. And so that's how we measure public opinion. There's a couple more concepts, though. First is the issue of random sampling that I mentioned. So when we do surveys, we do a random sample, right? So you just pick randomly people from the country, and usually pick about 1,000 people and ask them some questions. If you didn't do it randomly, if you asked, say, just older people, or if you asked just people who identified as Republicans, or if you asked just, say, men about a particular question, you're going to get a bias in your results because it's going to be just about that group of people. And so in order to figure out what the general public views on a particular issue, you need to have a random sampling. So you need to pick randomly so that you get a mixture of old and young, different races, different party identifications, and so forth. And when you do a random sample of 1,000 people, you'll have a margin of error of about 3.5%. What this means is that we can get really, really, really close to understanding what the general population thinks from just a sample, which is a really a great technique for being able to not have to poll everybody, because it would be impossible, nearly impossible, to poll 330 million people on a topic even once, let alone multiple times. But because of mathematical probabilities, if you just pull a random sample of 1,000, you can get a great understanding of what the entire population thinks. It's the same way, like, for example, if you had a bag of marbles and a bag of 100 marbles and you pulled out 10 of them, you would have a good understanding of really closely of what the different colors were and what the different proportions are between the colors of marbles. Now, if you had a sample size of 10,000 people, you could get a margin of error within 1%. So you'd be within 1% of the general population, most likely, of what they think. But 10,000 people is 10 times the number of people to poll. And so we generally are okay with a 3.5% margin of error in order to figure out how people view a particular issue or a politician. Finally, what is polarization? Polarization in public opinion means when we have contrasting views about an issue. And so why is this important? Well, the more polarization that we have in society, the harder it is to compromise, and the more tension and conflict arises. And so we don't want as much polarization because it allows for more compromise and allows for things to get more accomplished with the government. And the question is, are Americans polarized? And most Americans are moderate in their beliefs, but there has been an increasing polarization over time. So while the general public is generally moderate with regards to issues, we are finding an increasing polarization that's happening with the elites, but also with the general population. And this is what's increasing the tension over particular presidential elections, over particular policy issues, and definitely sets up the possibility of even having social unrest. All right, that is public opinion. Thank you so much.